Welcome to the New Retirement Podcast. Today we're going to be talking with Melissa Fredette, the former president of postgraduate programs at Hult International Business School, about what she learned during her journey to financial independence and as she transitions into retirement before 50, using a portfolio of rental properties. So Melissa just retired this past month. And we're also going to dive into some of the lessons she's learned from other women based on her experience, both mentoring and being mentored by successful peers on her journey. So with that, Melissa, welcome to our show. It's great to have you join us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's cool how this kind of came together. I saw your post on Choose FI, and I just was looking at it again. I saw you got 1.3 or 1,300 likes for your post, and hundreds of comments. Pretty amazing, right? That's an amazing community. And it was intriguing, and I thought it would be really good for our audience to kind of hear from someone directly, like how they did it. And so I was wondering if you could give us kind of a quick recap of your post, about kind of what you built and how you're paying for your retirement.
Yeah, I was kind of blown away by the response. Really exciting. I think it's great to be part of a community, and I've gotten a lot of help and insights from the community over the years. So it was just kind of important for me, I think, to put out there. I think we all struggle over the years just trying to slog away. And I think it's great to read about success stories. So I wanted to kind of put it out there. So my post basically was just putting out there that, here I am, I'm a woman before 50. I have, reached financial independence and retiring before the age of 50 on my own without a spouse. I am in a high cost of living area, and I've been a high earner, so that's been lucky. And I'm doing it a little bit differently. It's mostly through rental income, as you've said. I haven't kind of gone that traditional path of a lot of investments or stocks or anything like that. That's just not been my path. So it's been a little different, and certainly made mistakes along the way. And I think that's really important to talk about too, not just the yay, I've, kind of hit this great milestone, but you can make mistakes and take a few steps back, but still make it. So it was kind of a little bit to just say, hey, you can do that. And, we have down days, but you can make it and sort of forge your own path. And you sort of mentioned, yes, I kind of have this passion for, I think women, we struggle a lot sometimes. So just to kind of get out there that even being on your own, being a partner and being female, you can kind of get out there and do it as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a good story to get out there and show people that, hey, it is possible. And also, I think, like you mentioned, most of our audience is focused on kind of traditional equity investing versus real estate. And, you're highlighting that, hey, you can do this with real estate. And I also think it's interesting that you've kind of built this to 11 doors. So yeah, and you have properties in a couple different places, and then you're purposely kind of slowing down. It's not like you're trying to keep building this thing to 50 or whatever doors, right, like you read about some of these things. So just love to hear kind of like how you chose this path of real estate, and I'll ask you some questions about kind of what you've learned along the way, but just really like how you got started on this path.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So it was a bit by mistake. Never thought about owning properties or rentals at all. I have worked for pretty much the same company. It's sort of an umbrella company with different divisions, and we can talk about that later, but for the last 24 years. And at one point I got the opportunity to work abroad in Switzerland, and I owned a condo. And so I had just bought it and I wasn't ready to sell it. So I kind of became an accidental landlady. And that sort of, I was scared and terrified, and it ended up being a friend that moved in. So that kind of eased that for me a little bit. So I think that's really how it started, that it was like, oh, this isn't so bad and it isn't so scary, right? And when I moved back, I ended up just buying a different house and keeping that as a rental. So that kind of started there. And then over time, I came back. I had Switzerland, when you leave, they kind of give you your pension, like get out, take your pension with you. And so I had a chunk of money. And so I just, bought a property with that. And it just inspired me. I really like real estate. I like properties. I love design. I love interior design. So it spoke to me. And so that's how it really started. Don't know how far you want me to go down. I could keep going forever, but I think the 11 doors, as we call them, real estate folks say, is unusual. A lot of real estate investors, they're looking for scale. They
Mhm.
want a lot. You hear, different sites. There's one called Bigger Pockets, which is the main one. And a lot of their podcasts, you see, how this person scaled to 100 units and or 100 doors in 2 years. And that's not been my journey. I want enough to live on. I want enough rental income to live on. And I'm not trying to amass an empire. That's not my goal. So I really was trying to figure out what kind of cash flow do I need to live
Mhm.
on. So that's been my focus over the past couple of years, is to really carve out what do I need to live on, and then what kind of rental income do I need. So my 11 doors are in one triplex near me in the
Mhm.
Boston area and two fourplexes in New Hampshire. So that's the makeup. And then I live between two little condos in the Boston area and the coastal New England area, and then one in Florida that I bought in after the market crash in 2009, basically.
Got it. And does do you feel like, so you clearly feel like that's enough, and you have the right hedging in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like, the right leverage on these things, and
Mm-hmm.
to pay for, to be able to, I guess, weather ups and downs. Is it all 100% rented out right now?
Yeah, so the two condos I own are they're fully paid for. And I actually, both of them are in sort of touristy areas. So what my plan is, I move between. So I'm in the New England area in the winter and I rent it out in the summer, and I get out of here and I rent Florida out. So I have a renter in Florida right now. So it's not ideal for me to, sort of, I'm not in Marblehead, Massachusetts in the
Mhm.
summer. I have renters here. So that's part of it, but they're fully paid off. And then my three houses that each
Mhm.
have apartments within them, I do have mortgages on those, but I put a hefty down payment on. So my entire portfolio, I have about 60% equity. So I'm not highly leveraged at all. I'm a very sort of, I think, moderate to low risk type person.
Mhm.
All 11 of them are rented. All 11 in this pandemic, thank goodness, knock on wood, are paying rent. One
Mhm.
tends to pay a little bit later, but we're working with her. I'm not someone who, we're not pushing our luck with anything. We're trying to work with people, but I've been very lucky up till now. So they're all rented. I just had a turnover in December. It rented right away.
Mhm.
So again, knock on wood, been very lucky.
Great. And are you doing the property management yourself, or do you outsource that?
Yeah. So I think, this is interesting because a lot of people, when they think about, renting, oh, do everything yourself and don't pay, don't, do you, go in and fix toilets? I don't do any of that myself.
Yeah.
So I've learned over time, and I think there's a lot of great books on these topics, do what you do well and pay for the rest.
Mhm.
So I self-manage the triplex near me just because it is very close. And by self-manage, that means I collect the rent, I take the calls from the tenants. I don't fix toilets. I don't fix just about anything. I did put light bulbs in, so I'm very proud of myself there, but that's about the extent of my DIY capability.
Yeah.
So I have a great team. I have handymen, I have contractors, and I just field the calls. The two fourplexes in New Hampshire, I have a property manager. They take all the calls, they collect the rent, they deal with the turnovers.
Yeah.
But I have a team, quote unquote, team down here in Massachusetts that handles all of that for
I
me.
could see once you've built the team, though, it would be tempting to leverage the team, because that seems like the big friction cost, and buy
Correct.
more properties and kind of crank up the cash flow further.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people that do properties where they have almost none of their own money in the house, right?
Mhm.
They put some money in, they get a fixer, they fix it up, they refinance it, they pull that money out and they go on to the next. And I think that's a great strategy. I think it's super impressive, but that's just not, I think you really, if someone were to go into real estate, I think it's really important that you're thoughtful and you think about what is your goal. And
Mhm.
there's an accumulation phase. I'm not in the accumulation phase anymore. I'm in the sort of maintenance phase. And my last properties were in this last year when I knew I needed to get my final properties because I was ready to hit
Mhm.
the, retire button. So I
Got it.
wasn't really in that mode. Now, having said that, those last two fourplexes both have there is both room to grow, so to speak. So both of those are properties that the units are they're under market. So both of them I can fix up. I can, there's force appreciate, so to speak. So I can
Yeah.
fix them up and definitely command more rent over time. Again, I'm
Mhm.
not rushing anybody out the door during a pandemic, but I think over time they will command more rent. So I think
Got
that
it.
there's great upside.
Nice. when you were buying these, how did you decide what was a good investment, and like what are some of the I guess characteristics and metrics that you're looking for in a property?
Yeah. Yeah, so you can tell I like multifamilies. Some people ask why. A lot of people do single families. What I like about multifamilies is a couple of things. The first one is I have one roof I need to worry about.
Hmm.
So some of the big ticket items are shared. I like that. I sort of like that, it's kind of all in one. You kind of go have one property you need to go to, and everybody's, sort of there. So there's a couple things I just like about the multifamily mindset, and that's what I focus on is multifamily. So I primarily look at that. I look at, can the utilities, are they split out so the tenants pay their own utilities to keep the costs low? The first thing that I do to analyze in real estate investing, we call it the 1% rule. It's
Hmm.
very quick back of the envelope math. So basically, I look at the property cost or what I think it'll sell for. And then I look on things like Zillow or Hot Pads and what is a unit rent for? What is the rent?
Hmm.
So say for every $100,000 of house, you should be able to command 1,000 a month in rent. So
Hmm.
the monthly rent should be 1% of the purchase price. If it
Yep.
doesn't meet that rule at least, then you move on. If it
Got it.
does meet it, then that just means you need to dive deeper and do some more looking at, the operating costs and things like cap rate. And there's more things you can look at, but that's a great quick sort of, finger in the wind. Is this even worth going into? There are some places where you can't find the 1% rule, California, Boston area at this point. And, so people say, well, I can't possibly find the 1% rule here, so I can't get into real estate investing. Well, that's why I ended up in New Hampshire. You go further afield, you go to other parts of the country. There's places where you can find it.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I look at.
Yeah, I know. I was talking to a friend of mine who bought a condo here in a neighboring town, and we were talking through them. I actually took him. I was asking him how the economics worked, and essentially it comes down to a capital appreciation play. He's kind of
Yeah.
paying for the mortgage, paying for the house and taxes and stuff, but it spends, this is on a few $100,000 condo, probably $400,000 or $500,000 condo. I think it was spending, a couple $1,000 a year in free cash flow, not a lot. So
Yeah.
at best,
Yeah.
what does just really quick back to the property management, like what does that cost,
Yeah.
compared? So one is yourself and one is, you've outsourced it.
Yeah. So the property management, so it depends on the region. Typically it's 8 to 10%. So I pay them 8% a month, this
Hmm.
particular property management. What that covers is they basically handle rent collection, processing. They actually collect all the utility bills and pay those out for me. Obviously, I pay them actual money for the
Hmm.
utilities, but they process all that. They take all the calls from the tenants that have issues. They send the handyman out there. I pay for the repairs
Hmm.
separately, obviously. But they'll do things like I did completely gut renovate one unit. They oversee that. Then I'll pay them like 15% of the work to oversee
Hmm.
it. But then I don't even have to worry about finding the contractors, overseeing the job. They'll do all
Hmm.
that for me. But
Hmm.
it's 8% if, maintenance mode, it's basically 8%.
Hmm.
And then when you have a turnover of a unit, they'll take something like 1 month's rent to
Hmm.
market it, screen the tenant, do all the
Yep.
paperwork, the lease, collect the security deposit, all that kind of stuff to do a
Hmm.
turnover.
Wow. So it's not super cheap then. I mean, 8 to 10% is like a pretty significant chunk of change.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, it feels like, is there a national business that does this? It feels like this, even I know it feels like it's a local business today, but this is the kind of thing that could be,
Franchised out or something.
yeah, where you could have a national call center and, I mean, you need to have local teams and maybe some local reps, but you could, all the payment processing and taking phone calls and like firing off maintenance could probably be coordinated in a centralized way at scale. Um,
Possibly. I mean, it's interesting. The only reason I didn't have one up here when I was working full time is I couldn't find a good one. They weren't returning my calls. And I'm like, if they're not returning my calls as a potential customer, they're certainly not going to return tenant calls. So it's hard to find good property managers in some areas. It's interesting.
yeah. It feels like it's one of those local. I mean, when I talk to folks that do this kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, I've got this local property manager. They're on site and they do this kind of stuff, but it
Mm.
probably isn't as efficient as it could be.
Yeah.
So when you're doing things like leasing and setting up all legal agreements, do you do that yourself, or do you get outside help?
Yep. So for the triplex that I self manage, What I did at the beginning was I got a template lease for the state. Every state has its own laws, and it's
Mm,
super important if people get into being a landlord that you are very careful about your own laws. So you can look online, there's template leases for your state. And what I did was I kind of doctored up my own lease, and then I have a lawyer for the state, and I had him look at it. And the reason I did that was I didn't want to pay him all the money to kind of do a lease from scratch because that would have cost more. But I could give him something of what I wanted him to look at, and then he could eyeball it, give me a couple tweaks, and then it was cheaper. But then I knew I had a good, solid legal lease. And so that was kind of the perfect way. But I would definitely recommend a lawyer look at it because you don't want to run afoul of the laws in your state.
got it. So it sounds like between yourself kind of being the local property manager and then your remote team and your lawyer, you're able to kind of manage this portfolio of 11 properties.
Mhm.
And that's what you need. Any other tools that you use when you're managing this stuff and assessing things?
Yeah. So I use, there's this online system called cozy.co.
Hmm.
So there's a few online tools. Cozy has a few functionalities. The main one I use it for is the tenants can do online rent payments. They set up
Hmm.
automatic debit basically for their monthly rent. It
Hmm.
sends them reminders, which is great. They can set it up for it to come straight out of their checking account, doesn't cost them anything, which is great for a landlord that it reminds them, and then the rent comes on time, which is
Yep.
perfect. It can do screening. Applicants can apply. You can do kind of credit checks through it. I can keep track of my expenses as a landlord. So when I
Mm,
send everything to my accountant, I can just download all my expenses. So Cozy is a great sort of landlord tool that I use.
yep. Nice.
So I think that's the biggest one that I would use. So I can do payments, expenses, stuff through there. And it has more functionality that I don't really use it for, but that's a big one.
Awesome. And then just in terms of like your monthly time going into managing this, what's that look like?
So if I were to average it out, I would say I'm spending probably 30 minutes a week
Hmm.
on
Well,
average of my like active time. So there might be one week where I'm hearing more from my tenants and it's usually or communicating back and forth with the property manager
mhm.
on if say we're doing a renovation of one of the units, then they'll have questions. But in general, it's very little time. I would say 2 to 3 hours a month is probably what I'm spending on hand-on time. So yeah, if I was self-managing all these units, but I also, then it would be more. If I was running over and I was fixing the toilets, it would be a
Mhm.
lot more than that. But
Sure.
yeah,
Wow.
not
Well,
much.
I could see, actually, and what do you budget? So 8 to 10% for the property management, and then like,
Mhm.
what do you think the blended percentage is for maintenance for everything else? So when you do, aggregate all your plumbing and electrical or whatever support you need to provide to people, maintenance stuff, does that like another 8 to 10% a year or something like that?
Yeah, so it depends on the property. So I kind of have it like a bottom up, but it's like I would say it's like 5 to 7% a month, yeah, for maintenance.
Yeah.
I would say is what it is. Like, and again, it just depends. So what I'm trying to do is before I hit the button on retirement, one of the things I did was I came up with a big chunk of a change for CapEx, we call it, which is the
Hmm.
big stuff, electrical, roof, HVAC. And I'm actually getting a lot of this done over this next couple of years. So all
Hmm.
like the heaters, the furnaces that are old, I'm just getting redone, both for
Hmm.
efficiency's sake. So I'm spending less on heat,
Yep.
but also just get it
Yep.
done earlier, and then they always seem to go in the coldest day of the winter anyway, and you get
Right.
angry tenants. So I wanted to have all of that done, but also what that did for me as well is it frees up more monthly cash flow. So
Right.
I kind of put that money aside. So what you need to think about is you've got your mortgage, taxes, and insurance and stuff, like your
Hmm.
PITI, they call it. So
Yep.
you've got your rent, your gross rent minus the PITI, minus your maintenance,
Yep.
property management if you have it, and then this thing called CapEx, that big
Yep.
like the roof goes, the heater goes, or if you need to renovate. So that CapEx,
Yep.
I just basically saved a ton of money, put it aside, keep it in a high yield savings, and
Hmm.
I've got that for the next 10 years. And then I basically don't have to worry about that for the monthly cash flow. Then I can kind
Yep.
of keep that money coming in.
I got to say, it's got to I imagine for someone like yourself that's been pretty, very, very successful over your career, that it would be very tempting to just keep doing this. You built the the business, you built the infrastructure, you got the teams, you know, could you see doubling it or more, kind of like gradually cranking it up over time and
Oh,
generating more and more free cash
I
flow?
look at Redfin every day. I mean, I look at properties every day. I go to open houses all the time. It's super tempting,
Yeah.
but I can't because now I've left work, so I don't have a W-2 income anymore, so no one's going to give me a mortgage. So I've actually created a way to keep myself honest.
Yeah. What's that
Yeah.
way? Which is
Well, I mean, I
the
can't get a
W-2 being
mortgage.
not, yeah,
I
right.
can't get a mortgage at this
Yeah.
point unless I did sort of like, seller financing or,
Mhm.
hard money or something. So
Hmm.
no, this is
That's
it for me.
interesting.
But I did think about it, but that would have meant I would have had to stay working for another year or two. And,
Yeah.
it's all those trade-offs in life that you have to make the decision on what's, yeah, I mean, I was tempted, but it's like, do I want to work another year or two and build more properties? And then it's just like, how much do you really need? You know?
Well, yeah, here's a question for you. What's the effective interest rate that you get off of your portfolio net to? I don't know only if you're comfortable sharing that. I'd just be curious.
What do you mean? So you mean
So,
like,
if you put $100,000 into fixed income, like a bond portfolio, right? The
yeah,
interest rates are terrible, so you might, maybe
yeah,
you're getting 1 to 2% or something like that. It's
right,
pretty low. Versus you have the value of your
yeah.
portfolio. What does that generate from I guess a percent of I guess you could say just the cash on cash part. Well, you lever it, right? So
Well, so that's where it gets complicated, right? So real
yeah.
estate it's interesting. It's a little different. Your dividends, right? So like my dividends are my monthly, like I get rents every month and then it's
Hmm.
appreciating. You hope to. So what I say when people are interested in real estate, they get greedy on both ends, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I've been lucky because I've gotten lucky on the appreciation. Like I've happened to be able to, yes, get the rent. So
Hmm.
for instance, I've got a property that I bought for 350,000 and the gross rents,
Hmm.
are 4,200 a month.
Yep.
Right. So that's great. And I get a check every month for over 3,000, 3,200 a month.
Hmm.
Um, it's awesome, right? So
Yep.
that's great. And I have, I put 30% down on that. So
Yep.
great cash on cash return and
Yep.
in a way. Plus it's appreciating. It's already in the less than a year that I've owned it, supposedly. It's worth like,
Yep.
380,
Yep.
supposedly.
Right.
And I've been lucky. I've bought and sold duplexes. The last duplex I sold, it appreciated 35% in 2 years.
Hmm.
But what I say to people is don't expect that, right? Like I buy for cash flow. That's what I
Yep.
buy for. And then I assume that that property is going to appreciate something like, 3 to 5% a year over the
Yep.
years. So those are two ways that properties can sort of help you over time. You get the dividends and then the appreciation, but I think you have to make a decision. So
Yep.
I've gotten lucky on the appreciation side, and yes, over time you have that asset that is your tenants, by the way, are paying down your mortgage, keep in
Yep.
mind,
Right.
and it's appreciating.
Yeah. So, like, let me run these numbers back by you and make sure I understand this right. So, buy a property for 350,000 bucks. It's
Mm-hmm.
roughly paying 36,000, call it 35,000 a year, right? 10%, over 10%,
Mm-hmm.
unlevered.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put 100,000 bucks into it, so, or a little bit more. So you have a mortgage, but you're from is your mortgage coming out of that 3,000 you're getting, or it's already come off the top?
So the mortgage is so of the right. So of the 4,000,
Yep.
then so of the 4,000, then you've got the yeah, the 4,200, then we've got the mortgages coming out of that, and then
Oh, it is.
the PM is coming out of that as well.
Right.
So
Wow.
yeah.
So that's amazing, because so basically you're getting 10% without any leverage. And then you put the mortgage on it. So the cash on cash is like 36%. That's
Yeah,
amazing,
no,
right?
it's a
I mean, think
good.
about that compared to like what you're getting in the fixed income. It's like, our audience is like, they'd be killing themselves to probably find like 5 or 6%, rate of return out there that's reliable.
Yeah,
So
so the money, the cash I've had to put in with real estate, and I'd have to go back and I didn't get these numbers for you, like, and I could have, but what I've had to put in to real estate I'd never have been able to do that to like kind of, I'd have to have saved so much more and put so much more into, say, index funds to get the 4% return to be able to retire. I've
Right.
been able to do it much quickly in real estate because of that.
Right.
Now, that's just because I'm comfortable with real estate. So as
Yep.
people are like, oh, I could do it quicker, I'll do real estate. Like,
Mm.
well, you need to think about, do you like
Yep.
real estate? Don't
Right.
do it if you don't like real estate.
Right.
Do you like real estate enough to deal with the tenant questions and the, hey, this light bulb is out, will you come over and deal with it? And like,
Yeah.
you've got to like it enough, right?
Right.
So there's trade-offs. So that's what I
Right.
say to people is like, yes, you could do it with less of your own dollars in,
Hmm.
but there's trade-offs to it too.
For
So,
sure. Yeah.
and you may
And
not get it appreciate. You may hit a, it didn't. People that bought stuff in 2006 that thought they were doing a great job, then the market crashed, and some people their property has never come back from that.
yeah.
So
Right. Great. Well, it's great
it's
to
not a
have kind
given.
of, yeah, have that objective point of view. And like, also if things go against you and you're all in one asset class,
Correct.
you can get hurt. Okay. Last question on this exit strategy. So,
Mm,
you know, you're
yeah.
or approaching 50, got a
Yep.
nice portfolio. It's great, financially independent. Fast forward 25 years,
Yeah. And I don't want to deal with the tenants anymore. What
yeah.
do I
And
do?
what is it? What happens?
Yeah, it's a great question because my portfolio is about 60% real estate. And then I've got, I would say 25, 27% in, 401k and other sort of retirement vehicles. So my thought was, 10 years, 15 years, maybe I might want out. So the
Mm-hmm.
thought is, if I want out, what I did was the other thing with multifamilies that I like, and these particular multifamilies I bought specifically so that I had two options. Either I sell them as multifamilies, assuming the market is decent, I can sell them as multifamilies as rentals, the way that they are, and then just take whatever equity I have and I plow those into index funds or whatever I want to do. The other thing I can do with the configuration, the way that they are, is I bought ones that I could potentially condoize, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So I could make them into condos, pretty them up, sell them as individual units. In some places, in some cases, the one that I have, particularly in the Boston area, would be great as condos. And
Yep.
that might even pay out better. So if I decide that's a better avenue for me, then I could do that. So that gives me a few different options. What I wanted was options. Or I just stick with it and turn over the triplex I have to a property manager as well. And then I don't manage any of them myself and I just keep going. So
Yep.
I wanted I wanted something that gave me options,
Yeah.
basically.
Makes sense. Can you share some of the you mentioned kind of big quote unquote dumb choices that you've made along the
Yeah.
and lessons you've learned? Can you kind of share some of those?
Yeah. I mean, so, we all have them, right? So I would say it's related. There's a few, some relate to real estate and some don't. I would say the ones that relate to real estate, I mean, the first thing I did was, I got all excited about this like, rental property idea before I knew anything. I did no research. I found my first duplex and I was like, wow, the rents are this and my mortgage is this, then that's money that I'm making. And I didn't know about maintenance and I didn't know about CapEx and just didn't know any of these like, cap rates or 1% rule. And I just jumped in um, and it wasn't the best deal. I ended up messing it up upwards, so to speak, because it happened to be in this town that was hitting hot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one that, yeah, it was like, I think 40%. I ended up selling it for like
Mm-hmm.
40% profit in
Mm-hmm.
like 2.5 years. So, but it's still like, I think it was shame on me. I mean, I never should start any kind of investment without knowing enough about the market. That was not a good move. I shouldn't be a landlord without doing enough research. That I'm a little embarrassed that I just jumped in that way. I also made a couple of emotional decisions about tenants. They weren't meeting the criteria that I have. You have
Mm-hmm.
criteria when you have tenants about their credit ratings and their ratio of income to the rent. And I allowed myself to get swayed by some, stories that they had. And you want to be, I think it's important as a landlord to kind of be a human being as well, and work with people. But I also think you have to use, your common sense. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
times that I didn't sort of think of this, you have to have kind of a human being, but you also have to be a business person. The times that I wasn't making smart decisions, it bit me.
Yeah.
And, just ended up being, stupid, not tragic, but just not smart situations that I got myself into. And then I guess the third one that I can think of is I have bought and sold a lot of properties, and not only the rentals, but my own private residences that I have fixed up, which is partly where I've gotten some of the down payments. I've done some renovations and lived in them for 2 years, and I work with a contractor, and he's amazing. So I don't tend to do inspections. He comes along, and he's
Hmm.
taught me a ton, and he's great. And this one duplex I was getting ready to buy, and he happened to be away, and I got a little too big for my britches, and I was like,
Hmm.
no, I got this. It's a renovated property, and it's a great deal, and I
Yeah.
bought it, and it was
It was a mess.
a little bit of a shoddy duplex. And when he
Yeah.
came back, he um, didn't say much, but his face said it all. Yeah, I didn't make a good decision. So
Yeah.
don't get too big for your britches, and know your place. I think a little bit
Right.
there. So yeah, so those are some of the lessons. But
Good.
otherwise, outside of real estate, I didn't start investing in a 401k until way too late. Stuff like that. I think, just if I could have gone back, when I see people on some of these communities saying, "Oh, what would you give advice to?" I'm in my 20s, and I'm like, put money in your 401k as much as you can possibly do, stuff like that. I think I wish I
Yeah.
would have done earlier.
Well, and I think be educated, right, and be curious,
Yeah.
like you were, right, and kind of looking around and being open to these different ideas,
Yeah.
um, and
And
hearing
every
stories.
mistake we make, it teaches us for next time. So I guess, that mistake I made, that first property I bought, I definitely learned, like I just smacked myself in the head, but it taught me everything teaches you for the next time. So I guess, you learn the hard way, but
Yeah.
yeah, dumb
I could
mistake.
see it. I could totally see on the emotional side, and being a landlord, it's tough, right? You want to help people out,
Yeah.
but also, I was so actually back to my friend. He was like, yeah, when we have these tenants, but then he kind of got into some of the drama. He's like, yeah, but it actually turns out that there was this couple, and then there's a baby, and then one more person has a substance abuse problem, and then suddenly she's out, and this other guy's on the lease, and it's like, wow,
Yeah.
he was kind of rolling with it. I was like, that sounds like a lot, and that's one property, and you could
Yeah.
see how that could go sideways. Also, I think in certain states, and also with the pandemic, how do you, if someone's not performing, right, they're not delivering the rent, at what
Yeah.
point do you like say, okay, we have to evict somebody, and what does that look like? Do they trash the
Yeah.
place on the way out? You got to be
Yeah.
careful with that stuff.
Well, it's interesting. That's another reason why I like multifamilies, right? If I've got 4 units and one under one mortgage, and
Hmm.
one somehow isn't paying their rent, I've got three others paying that rent under that roof. So it's
Right.
another reason why I like the multifamilies is I'm not reliant. Single family, you've got one person paying the rent for that property, and
Yeah.
you're pretty reliant in that situation. So it's another reason why I like the multifamilies.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Well, this is awesome. So I'd like to move on to kind of your own background, and kind of lessons you've learned from people, as you've gone through your own life. Can you just give us a little bit about kind of how you came up, and how you ended up with Halt, and what any kind of highlights from your career and takeaways from your career there, and how that may have shaped kind of like where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a bit of an anomaly. So this company that I worked for, so Holt International Business School, is uh, was founded by this guy who Swedish entrepreneur. He sort of took over this failing business school. He founded a very big private travel company called EF Education. So I started with EF Education back in '97. So I worked for different parts of that organization. It's kind of an umbrella company with different divisions, different businesses within. So I worked for different businesses within that for many, many years. The founder sort of rescued this business school. Eventually, ended up working for that business school. Over those years, I started entry level and worked
Mhm.
my way up over time. It's the founder is Swedish, and I think there's a lot. It's a very international organization. All of the divisions and companies I worked within under this umbrella organization, very international. Lot of women, very young. And so, I was very lucky to have, a lot of exposure to different people. I worked in Switzerland, I mentioned, for 4 years. I moved to London twice. I got, a lot of exposure to different people, different ways of thinking.
Mhm.
I'm very, very lucky, and just kind of was able to sort of understand a little bit about. I think as a woman, you sort of like, you come in a little later to sort of what you bring to the table and sort of who you are. And I had some great mentors, both male and female. And I think, just really was very lucky to also be entrusted, with more and more responsibility. So I started entry level. I ended up being the head of the postgraduate programs there at Hult. So we had business schools, four campuses in 3 different countries. So we had schools in San Francisco, Boston, London, Dubai. So super fun, crazy, lots of responsibility. It was very interesting this last year with the pandemic. I was supposed to retire in the summer and stayed a little longer to help them kind of get over the hump there. And just, worked with amazing people, the best people you could ever imagine, staff, and then students. We had international at the school. We had it's all international students. So basically in a campus, Boston campus would have 1,000 students, and of that, it's 100 different nationalities. So it's just a really cool, vibrant group that we worked with. So I was very, very fortunate for my career. Loved every second of it. And excited for
was it hard to step away?
Yes and no. Like, yes, in the sense that, especially the people, I think the pace, I mean, you can't, it's just hard to describe. I mean, the people are, again, I worked there for 24 years. Like, you cannot imagine a more like hardworking, funny, well-traveled, I mean, really kind of twisted sense of humor, just killer group of people. Just every single person works hard. Every single person is committed. Every single person's all in. And that's just exciting. It was exciting from day one. Gave, your entry level, they give you total ownership, and that's addictive. And it was right up till the end. And I think for me, it's just also the realization, I'm turning 50. I love travel. That's how I ended up at the company, right? And I moved overseas. And it's just like, it also kind of, the last several years, I started thinking about, I don't have kids, and it's like, what's next for me? I want to see more of the world. I want to experience more. And it was a little scary to think about, like, what's next? And I knew that the fact that it was that scary kind of meant that it was right. Like I could work at this pace till the end of my life, but I don't think that's what I'm supposed to do. I feel like there's something next, and it scared the hell out of me. And I kind of felt like I was an explorer, like trying to figure out if the earth was actually flat and I'm going to fall off the edge. But I think that's good for me. So I decided to figure out what's at the edge of the earth.
How do you go about thinking about this? So you've had this career. You've met all these interesting people. You've accomplished a lot there. Then you've built this portfolio that lets you be financially independent. So you're completely free. It doesn't take a lot of time. 2 to 3 hours a month. That's amazing. So what resources are you using, and how are you approaching thinking about this next phase and budgeting your time?
Well, I love that question, because I think there's so much in the financial independence space and the retirement space that focuses on the money piece, right? And actually, a lot of what I've been thinking about the last 2 years is the rest of it, right? Especially because I don't have a partner, right? Like, it's like, you get a cat and then you need another cat because they can play with each other. Like, like, what am I doing with my time? So, I read this really great book. It's very outdated, but it was called something like Retire, like Wild, Happy, and Free, right? And it's like thinking about the rest of retirement. Okay, you're thinking about the financial piece of it, but what about your social life? And what about, your feeling of self-worth and your, so I've got a ton of hobbies that I love, that my work has been so all consuming that I just haven't had time. My last 2 years, I basically was traveling 50-50 between the US and London. I mean, it was just insane. So I've done photography, I've done interior design, I've done I want to do like upholstery. I want to I've loved this real estate, and not flipping, but like renovation. And, I've done painting and art, and there's a whole creative side to me that I haven't explored. And there's all of these interests plus travel. So my plan has been my plan before COVID was a third of the year near my family in Boston, a third of the year in Florida, and then a third of the year pick a place in the world and explore it. So there's that. And then I've got 4 nephews and a niece that I'm addicted to. So there's
Mhm.
them as well that I want to spend more time with, that I'm excited to do that. So I've got, notebooks. Maybe you can tell I'm like a very, I love lists. I love spreadsheets. So I've got all kinds of stuff I want to explore. So, but I also realize, right now I can tell I'm swinging to these pendulums of, I'll spend a day, then I'm like watching Netflix, and then I'm like repainting my cabinets, and I've got like 7 other orders of like upholstery stuff. And I can tell that I'm going to need time to recalibrate, right?
Yeah.
I've gone from this very intense career, and I'm okay with that. I think it's going to take me months to kind of find the new normal. Um, I want to, figure out what fitness is and figure out my health. And
Mhm.
so there's a long list. And I think it's okay that that's going to be a journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's good to have that perspective. I'll tell you from our community, we definitely get that question a lot. Like, how should
Yeah.
I use my time? What's next? I think many people don't think about it that much until they're out. And I've
Yeah.
seen people in the FI world, they get depressed. They're very focused on like, I'm marching towards this FI number and they got it all figured out. But once they get there, like, okay, I've been
Yeah.
engineering my life to do this, and then they're like, okay, now I don't have enough direction and purpose.
Yeah.
I
And I
talked to
think
JD
being
Roth a lot about that.
single, it forced me to, right? I don't have a
Yeah,
partner to distract me, right?
yeah,
So I had to really think about it. And my friends all work. Like, I don't have anybody to play with. So
right.
I had to really think about that. But I think it's really important to think about that,
Yeah,
And yeah, I've got a whole list. And that book was helpful. It gave some frameworks to sort of think about, almost like interest trees, and also how do you keep your brain engaged, because my job, it was very intellectually demanding. So how do I
hmm
make sure I'm keeping my brain engaged and learning? So I think those are important things to think about.
yeah. I feel like more people are going to be running into this. We're getting more and more efficient at doing things. More and more stuff's getting automated.
Mm.
There are people like you that are on leading edge, okay, I'm financially independent, and then there's more and more talk of like universal basic income and kind of like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we don't need so many factory workers. We've got robots. We may
Yeah.
not need that many delivery drivers or people in call centers. If those things get highly automated, we're gonna have millions of people that are
Yeah.
like, okay, I've got more time. How do I spend my time? Is it throwing
Yeah.
in the, there's lots of distractions, but can you be more intentional about, um, where you're applying that scarce resource?
Yeah. And then volunteering, right? Like, how can I mentor? I think about the budgeting in the FI space, like budgeting for like, I've got a couple of tenants who are single moms who are struggling, and I've been, I'm talking to them about like, do you want some help like putting a budget together? I'm happy to help you. And like,
Hmm.
then interviewing for I'm going to be helping some of the there's a couple of programs for teenagers like who are trying to get jobs like in like some of the towns nearby where these kids like they're really struggling and they're like trying to find jobs, and they need some interviewing skills. I'm like, I work for business school, like I'll help you do mock interviews. And so
Yeah,
how can I be of service? I think
yeah.
that's exciting as well.
Well, that is the key to happiness. It's having, I mean, you want to have control. I think be fit, get the right, taking care of yourself and your body and fitness and sleep and all that stuff. But then
Yeah.
having working on something that's bigger than yourself
Yeah.
is like essentially the key to it. It's not having
Right.
lots of money. You get bored of having lots of money if you have lots of
Right.
money pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, wow, so this was great. Can you share maybe a couple of the big either lessons you got from people that were mentoring you that helped you think about this stuff, or
Mm.
also people that you mentioned, you're starting to maybe help some of your tenants, you're thinking about volunteering with, younger people, and folks where you're kind of passing, paying it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think probably one of the best things that I ever was told, it's funny. Um, I don't know, like I guess career advice or life advice. So my one of my bosses, he's funny. He's a Swedish guy as well. He's lovely. He was giving me a job that I was supremely unqualified for. I thought I'd been doing something for 3 months, and he wanted me to then give me the boss's job. And I said, "You do know I don't know what I'm doing." And he's like, "Yes, I know." And he said, "But He said, you fix things, you're organized, you're a good manager, you're a good leader. You'll learn the knowledge of this particular area of the business. What I'm hiring you for is your core skills. And it was such a great moment for me. It was like he saw and articulated about me what my core skills were, which I didn't really understand before. And I think from that point, I was able to really understand what it is that I'm kind of fundamentally good at. I see a
Mhm.
lot of people kind of go through life like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And what do I want to do at my next job? And I think we're so focused at like, what do I do with myself? And what he gave me was a fundamental understanding of like, I'm good at efficiency, I'm good at organizing, I'm good at kind of what are the kind of key components. And those tend to be, of course, the things we love, right? And I can apply that to a lot of different things. And I've been able to do that successfully at work, but I think I can also do that successfully in my after work life as well. And I think that was a real gift that he gave me. And I think that that helps us once we understand what we're sort of fundamentally good at. I think that's a real key moment to unlock our confidence as well, not just our career or our success, but also our confidence. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, it makes me,
um
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, what were you going to say?
I think there's this Japanese term, I think it's ikage. I don't know if I'm getting it right, but like, you're trying to find that Venn diagram of like, what am I good at? What am I interested in? And what does the world need? And then if you
Mm,
can operate in that area,
yeah, where
um,
the
get
Venn
that
diagram. Yeah,
visibility, right?
yeah, right.
And for so many people, I think are also, since you've been in education, it's like, what the world needs is changing quickly. What people are
Yep.
good at it, we're getting a lot more visibility in what I think historically education is about like, okay, we have these raw humans, we're going to educate them all the same way, and we're going to try and make them good at math, science, reading, writing, or whatever. And some people are
Yeah,
good at art, and some people are good at math, and some people are good.
yeah,
It's like, but we're like, well, we're going to be good at everything, and the reality is only the top 2% that go to the top schools are either good at everything or they got the work ethic to kind of get there. But
yeah,
there's a lot of other people that are kind of like they're maybe left feeling like, it's, I'm not good enough, right?
yeah.
And that sticks with you.
And it's very rarely the job description or the job title that is what we're good at. It's usually a fundamental thing. Like you're usually, I'm really talented with like, I'm like really compelling with people. And so you can translate that to sales, or you can translate that to customer service. You can translate that to different things, but it's just like, what is that thing?
Mhm.
So I think that was the thing that helped me in terms of my mentoring. I think where I find I gravitate towards, especially with other women, but I think with people in general, is I find that I over and over and over talk to people about this sense of, I just find that people stop themselves up all the time. And this
Mhm.
sort of confidence or imposter syndrome or, you know, uh, difficulty in having difficult conversations. And I just find that we as humans get in our way about a million things. And I just think like if we could all just have the lives that we are meant to have without the hurdles we put in our own way, we'd all have these amazing lives. So I find, that confidence that we need to have is what I see all these people who are amazing people, who have amazing skills, who just stop themselves up all the time. And I find, especially women do that.
Mhm.
I think women, in particular, are held back by worry about hurting someone's feelings or worry about not being enough or what have you. And so I think a lot of my conversations are just around, why do why is that, your
Mhm.
fear, and kind of helping them over that and helping them find the language to maybe have a conversation that they need to have. So I think just, yeah, helping people battle those demons that they're feeling on the inside and just kind of get over it a little bit. And even just this whole, I just had a doctor's appointment this morning, and the woman that gave me my flu shot was like, "What do you mean you're retired? How old are you?" And I said, "I'm turning 50 in 3 months." And she's like, "What?" She's like, "I could never do that." I'm like, "I didn't think I could either." I'm like, "Listen."
Yeah.
And we had a conversation, and she wrote down some notes, and she's about to
Yeah.
look up the fire movement, and off she goes. She left with a smile on her face. I'm like, "Why can't you?
Yeah.
Why do we think we can't? We put all this limiting beliefs, these limiting beliefs in front of ourselves." And yeah, so I
Yeah.
think it's a lot about that.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, there's a lot of folks that they don't know where to start, and
Yeah.
you know, our lead designer, who's female, lives in Brooklyn. She was telling me a story about how she, I think, um, anyway, was talking to like her hairdresser or something like that, and was like, "What do you think about this? What do you think about this retirement idea?" And the person was like, "Retirement, that's just not for me." So that's where she stopped, and she's like, "I don't have a 401k, forget it."
Yeah.
And
Like,
and
why even
then
try?
yeah, don't even think about it. Like,
Right.
and so, yeah, how do you help people, realize what's possible? And so, was
Yeah.
there anything for you that was like, hey, here's this catalyst that made me think, discover fire, and kind of dive into it? Or you told me a story about how you started buying houses and everything else, but
Yeah. My story, it's interesting because I think for me, we grew up, my mom was a single mom. I was the oldest of 4 kids. I grew up in a situation of like, we were lower middle class. Like, I grew up very worried about money. So for me, it came from first a place of scarcity mindset of like, I
mhm,
don't want to worry about money. So for me, it was always living below my means because I wanted to make sure I had enough. Right. So that's where it started. So I just always wanted to kind of protect and make sure I had enough. And so live below my means, be careful, be frugal, and then learn how to budget. And then I'm very self competitive. So it's like, how much can I save and all this kind of stuff. And then, I started working with, back in like 2012, I started working with a fee based financial planner. And I
mhm,
kind of put my hands over my head and said, "Okay, tell me the bad news. I'm going to have to work till I die." Right. And he's like, "Well, no, I mean, you're not going to have to work till you die." So I was like, "Oh," he's like, "Well, what are your goals?" I'm like, "I don't know. I mean, could I stop at 70?" And so we ran all the numbers, and he's like, "Well, I don't know. I'm seeing like 62, 63. How does that feel?" I'm like,
mhm,
"Wow, that's awesome." And I'm like, "Okay, well," then of course self-competitive kicks in, and I'm like, "Well, maybe I could do below 60." And so what was great was we set up a yearly meeting, and again, it was just fee based, so I just paid him a yearly fee, and every year
mhm,
I'd come in and I'd refine the plan, and I kept knocking time off, right?
yeah,
And so he was like an accountability partner, right?
yeah,
Every year I'd come in and here's what I did, and he'd be like, "Holy crap, yeah, oh great, oh great,
yeah,
you sold that house and you made what? Okay, good, yeah."
yeah.
And so this year, we just said our goodbyes. I'm like, "I did it, Sebastian."
Wow.
And he's like, "That's amazing. You're the youngest person I've had. Like, good for you." And so I think that was helpful just to also have some context. I had no
Yeah,
context for it. And then what really kicked it also into higher gear was I heard about the fire movement in 2018.
yeah,
And that also helped with just tangible tips and tricks as
right,
well. So then I incorporated that into my tactics that I would
yeah,
bring to my, financial advisor every year. And like, okay, here's some little tactics to help accelerate it. And things like YNAB. I actually found YNAB to be incredibly helpful in
nice,
terms of like accelerating a lot of my savings and budgeting.
nice, yeah,
And then what I did as well was I built up my retirement budget, and I lived in that for a year before I actually pulled the trigger to
yeah,
know I could live within it.
that's great, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I had Jesse, the YNAB founder, on the podcast, and he was pretty
Ugh,
interesting. We talk about that. We talk about their company a lot, what they're doing, the
I mean,
method. It's the
we're a
method.
cult. I mean, everyone rolls their eyes. We're a cult, but it's amazing. Once it latches onto you, it's like no going back. It's amazing.
Yeah, I also think choose FI. Like, well, these communities of FI communities are great because you see people being successful, and
Hmm.
you see them. There are people like, hey, I'm 100,000 in debt. I just paid that off, or I saved my first 50,000 bucks. I got my first 100,000, and kind of how they get there. And I think
Yeah,
hearing those stories is very,
helpful.
reinforcing. Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting to hear about the planner too, and it's good that you did a fee-based one. We talk a lot about the cost of fees. I mean, 1%, it's not that bad. Well, you save up 2 million bucks, you're paying 20 grand a
Yeah,
year.
right.
And then if you're drawing down 4%, you're giving up 25% of your yearly
Correct.
income to the advisor. It's a lot.
Yep.
Um, Cool. Well, look, and also one other thought for you would be you could raise a fund. I mean, you could raise, instead of like, you don't have your income to do this, but like, I'm sure people would be like, hey, I'll give you some money to help buy more properties. You manage them and then spit me off a lower, you take a rake off the, you know, become a,
There you
essentially,
go.
you know,
There you go.
you could clearly do
I've
that.
got a whole, I'll put it in my notebook as another idea, keep myself busy and out of trouble.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think this is really good. Any, resources? I mean, so we've talked about Bigger Pockets, I think, and Choose FI. I think you mentioned Paula Pant. You liked her a lot as a
Yeah,
resource.
I like Paula Pant a lot. So she has a podcast and a blog called Afford Anything. So if anyone's interested in just sort of beginner and intermediate, I would say like my level real estate investing, or just any of this FI stuff, I think she's a great resource. She's kind of my level. She's kind of more the conservative side, real estate. She does both. She has other investments as well. But I found her resources very accessible and down to earth. So those were helpful for me. So I liked those. And I mentioned that there's a book called Landlording on Autopilot, which I thought was good just for a lot of systems, and just I think a good mindset for landlording. So I liked that as well. So you can find that on Amazon. So that's another one that's helpful. Bigger Pockets, you can cherry pick some good stuff there. I mean, obviously it's all good stuff, right? And actually they've got an amazing resource. Their website is fantastic. Their podcast, but there's a lot of stuff of like 200 units and storage units and all this kind of stuff. So there's also a lot of stuff in there that's a bit overwhelming, but you can definitely dive in there and find some good stuff and good stories in there for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a follow up in another like year or so and see how you're like a month into your retirement, right?
I'm like, I still think I'm on like Christmas or like New Year's vacation from work. So it's like, it's still very new. It still hasn't quite sunk in. So yeah, some point incredible. After a year, we'll see where I'm at.
Okay. Well, Melissa, anything else you want to share with our listeners?
No, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun.
Okay, awesome. Well, look, I'll just close it out here. So thanks, Melissa, for being on our show, and thanks, Dada Robeson, for being our sound engineer. Everyone else who's listening to this, appreciate your time and hopefully found this useful. Our goal at New Retirement is to help anyone plan and manage their retirement so they can make the most of their money and time, like we discussed here. And if you made it this far, please check out our private Facebook group, and you can find us on Twitter at New Retirement as well. We actually are having pretty active dialogues with people, in this and learning a lot with our community on those platforms, specifically Facebook. And then finally, any reviews are welcome and appreciated. We are reading them and getting feedback and trying to tune how we do this based on that. So thanks again and have a great day.